Let's take a look at accelerating DevOps with Pure Application System and UrbanCode Deploy. The first step is going to be to standardize on an enterprise topology. We're going to go into Pure Application System and create a virtual system pattern that will represent a standard topology for our organization. In this case, it's going to be a distributed WebSphere topology with a proxy server, a number of WebSphere standalone nodes, and a DB2 database. Going into the pattern editor, I can drag and drop the components of this application. We'll start with standalone server, add IHS, DB2, and next we're going to add a set of script packages. In this case, script packages to add additional packages to make the virtual machines compliant and to register the virtual machines. Finally, we'll drag an UrbanCode Deploy script package on that will register a deployed virtual system pattern to UrbanCode Deploy. Here I have my completed pattern with 5 distributed nodes, proxy server and DB2. I can deploy this pattern directly from Pure Application System. Simply provide a little bit of information. I can schedule the deployment to be in the future. And while we want to set good defaults so nothing is required, I can also customize the deployment parameters of the pattern. Here you'll see the UrbanCode Deploy server that I'm going to be registering the instance with is already configured. If I press OK, Pure Application System will deploy all of these virtual machines, middleware, and execute the script packages. Of course, content changes over time, and while we're going to use these standardized topologies for a stable base, we want to rapidly evolve application content on top. So we're going to check in application content and automation into UrbanCode Deploy, and then automate the deployment process. Here I'm going to log into UrbanCode Deploy, have a look at an application. In this case, it's a CLM enterprise deployment. I can see all the environments, and have a look at the components of this application. This includes the automation components as well. Here is a deployment process that is going to deploy all the application components. We go through, we customize some parameters on the Pure Application System, we install CLM, RRDI, configure WebSphere, and then configure the JTS so that everything is ready to go. Looking down at a specific component, in this case an automation component for installing RRDI, I can have a look at all the versions and I can compare versions to see what changes over time have been made. This is a very important aspect of infrastructure as code, that everything is checked in and versioned, and we can have a look at the differences both in deployed instances and then in the process over time. Each component also has a process. In this case, this is a very simple process that simply downloads the artifacts and runs a shell script. The next step is to deploy an environment from UrbanCode Deploy, which will leverage the standard topology in Pure Application System. I'm going to go to my application, create new environment, give it a name and a description. In this case, I'm going to select the blueprint, which is the link between UrbanCode and Pure Application System. I can organize my resources. This keeps things nicely under control. And you'll see I'm going to get a set of information that looks very similar to the deployment parameters in Pure Application System. Here I'll set an email address to be notified of successful instances and to add my user onto the deployed instance in Pure Application System. Looking at this environment, a set of resources have been defined. These map onto each of the parts of the pattern. Switching over, I'm going to just check in on the deployment process. Here is the new instance of my standard topology, and we can see the virtual machines are in the process of deploying and executing the compliance script packages. Once this is done, I can create snapshots of the whole system so that I can be restored to a known state. In this case, I'm going to take a snapshot of a cleanly deployed system. This environment can be used for multiple deployments from UrbanCode Deploy. If I refresh UrbanCode Deploy, I can see that all of my agents and resources are now online. At this point, I have an environment, and now I want to deploy my application. By going to the environment, I'm going to select the deployment process. In this case, deploying CLM. I can select the application component versions. I can either do this specifically for each component, or I can select the latest. There's a few parameters that are exposed as a part of the deployment process. Through the magic of TV, I'm putting this in fast forward, and we can see that we're running through the deployment process, putting on automation prep, then we'll go into the WebSphere configuration, create the database, install RRDI, install CLM, configure everything, configure the IHS nodes, and complete the JTS setup. UrbanCode Deploy allows us to organize these steps so that some are run sequentially, others are run in parallel. Now that my deployment process has completed, let's check to see if the application installed successfully. I'm going to have a look at my resources and find the IP address of the proxy server. Then I'll use this IP address to log into the CLM and look at the configuration. So the JTS is up, and I can see that I have all of my applications registered. The database has been configured, LDAP has also been configured, licenses, etc. Now what if I want to simply upgrade rather than do a clean and deploy? Using UrbanCode Deploy, we can have processes for things like this as well. In this case, I'll select the upgrade process. Once again, select my versions of components. This will result in a side-by-side install of CLM, which will then be switched over and to complete the upgrade. All of this is occurring on the same environment. Now, of course, as we're rapidly developing, we need some controls. My operations manager really only wants to deploy builds that have been well tested, so we're going to set up a pipeline of staging and production environments with some gates. Here I'm looking at the application for Jazz.net and our staging environments. In the environment gates, I've configured a status that needs to be on all components. This status is set through our automated tests on the components. So looking at the CLM component, I can go under versions and see that some of the builds have passed and some of them have failed. Only the past builds will be visible for deployment to staging and production. So in summary, to accelerate your DevOps, you can standardize enterprise topologies in pure application system where they're deployable, and then check in and version all of your infrastructure code, your application deployment automation, and deployment processes for those applications, which then in turn allows you to do continuous delivery of the application, to test staging environments, and to manage the deployments to your production environments.